Good evening. Welcome to Community Technology, where we connect the global community with news, information, and resources that we hope help improve your life. I'm Stu Reid. Here's my co-host, Dave Burstein. Hey, Dave.
Hello.
So what's the latest and the greatest on the technology news front, Dave?
Well, let me take it to what you just said. We connect the global community. One of the pieces of news that just came across is an AI conference in Africa. How many Africans do you think made it to that conference?
I don't know, 500?
800.
Wow.
And
Nice.
since it's particularly expensive and hard to get from one African country to another, you often have to fly by way of London or Paris.
Mm-hmm.
That's a heck of a lot. This stuff is going international, which is a good thing. Shouldn't all be owned by the United States and Europe.
Absolutely. What country hosted that in Africa? Do you know, Dave?
I have to apologize. It came by and I couldn't find it before the show.
Okay. Well,
But
maybe we'll get back and talk about that next week. Have
yeah,
some
we
results.
over the years we've had lots of reports. There's a huge startup scene in Kenya, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And did we talk on the air about the Ghana language project?
No, we did not talk about that. Looking through my notes, I saw some stories about that AI is working to translate some of the tribal idioms in Ghana and West Africa, but we haven't talked about that. Do you have some more details on
A
that?
team of volunteers in Ghana have put together a large language model to use to translate four local languages so obscure I had never even heard of them.
Mm-hmm.
But there are actually dozens of languages in Ghana and hundreds across Africa, most of which don't connect to the web. Google gave them a little bit of help, but the work was all done by the Ghanaians.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, this is stuff that can and should be taken advantage of everywhere. And the US is not that far ahead that other people need to be discouraged.
Mm-hmm.
We'll talk about AI in the second half of
Okay.
the show.
You had some medical news that you wanted to bring forward, Dave, if I'm not mistaken. A cancer breakthrough?
Well, it looks like it. Uh, to I've seen too many articles like this for decades. The current thing in science going around that's almost surely not going to prove out is a Korean claim that they have a superconductor that works at room temperature and pressure.
Mm-hmm.
They put the release out, a whole lot of news sites picked it up, but nobody's been able to replicate it yet, and they probably never will. Same thing is true, probably even more commonly in medicine, where there's been a cancer breakthrough almost every month for the last 10 years. Many of them have been legitimate breakthroughs that apply to a limited number of people. And we talked about how important it is to get a good diagnosis based on genetics of what kind of cancer you have, because more and more things are becoming treatable.
Yeah. We've talked about some breakthroughs in genetic treatment of breast cancer not too long ago on the show.
Yeah.
So
The
this is something new. Like,
survival rate from death cancer, 5 years, has gone up from 50% to 80%
mm-hmm.
in the last 2 decades.
Survival rate.
Survival rate,
Mm-hmm.
5 years, usually means you're going to make it. And that's good. I've got two sisters-in-laws who are a few years in and doing fine, thank you.
Right.
Uh, but this one seems to be a small molecule that attracts something that's necessary for the cancer to replicate, but isn't present in uh, many normal cells. Difference, it's like 30,000 to 1 in the lethality, which is remarkable compared to how chemo works. This is just getting into the first stage one couple of dozen patients trial, it worked really well in animals. This may or may not be a miracle for people. We won't know till they get a few thousand people trying it out.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to bring this one to the air because I'm hearing so many things in cancer improvements that I know the average doctor can't keep up with,
Mm-hmm.
which is why you want to get a first-rate doctor if you have reason to worry about cancer.
Mm-hmm. But this particular new treatment, Dave, how does it work? What's the science behind it?
The science behind it is straightforward. And one of the reasons it's so interesting is that AI is working on a slew of things like this, but this was developed traditionally. There is a process that allows the cancer cell to replicate rapidly. That's been known for a while, but they couldn't figure out any way to stop it. First positive results came 2 years ago, and now they're ready to start human trials because the animal trials went pretty good. It's a small molecule. It's not one of these big monoclonal antibodies, and it directly interferes with the replication, apparently, of many types of cancer cells.
Mm-hmm.
Unlike most of the new treatments that are very limited, they'll each work with one mutation, and there may be 80 different mutations that have been discovered in something like breast cancer.
Wow.
Okay, this is something that seems to be common to most cancer cells. And the other reason I wanted to bring it to the air is that what they are now doing really well with artificial intelligence is figuring out the structure of molecules and viruses. Possibly the most important result in anything in artificial intelligence comes from DeepMind in London, which took the 200,000 known proteins and made a three-dimensional model. Because the shape and the structure of the protein, it determines what it can do, not just the sequence of amino acids. It's been something like 85% effective. And Demis at DeepMind just reported that over 1 million medical researchers and physicians have started working with the data. And the first drug coming out of it has also gone into human trials. It's really remarkable what's happening and wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Not that there are some downsides, as we're about to discover. Another story, I deliberately put the good news first, but here's one that really got to me. There's another one coming right after it. Hospital Corporation of America, huge facility, $100 billion company, been buying up hospitals for decades and finding ways to make more money out of it.
Mm-hmm.
$5 billion last year.
How many? How many billion?
5.6 billion last year.
Wow.
Okay, this is from CNBC, and they're fine. Richard Morganson, one of the best reporters alive today, used to do all the financial stuff at the Times that won Pulitzer Prizes, discovered that HCA has been telling their doctors, send your patients to hospice as soon as you can, for several reasons. One of which is that a patient who dies in hospice, even if they're in the same bed in the same hospital, getting hospice care, doesn't count in the records of death in the hospital, which outfits like Medicare use to evaluate whether the hospital is doing a good job. So if a doctor hasn't sent a patient who might be eligible for hospice to hospice, and they die, that makes the hospital look bad. It's also more expensive because hospice care is usually limited. When a patient goes into hospice, they usually give routine treatments but nothing expensive, nothing intense, nothing that would, for example, involve an operation to cure cancer that develops in the ear in somebody who may have lung cancer and has a good chance of dying.
Mm-hmm. And Dave, doesn't that free up a hospital bed for another patient with some insurance payments, or maybe something more critical? Sending the patient to hospice opens the bed up.
If the hospice doesn't happen to be in the same hospital in the same bed, which sometimes it is.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a game that they're playing to get more money, to make the statistics look good. And what Gretchen did is she spoke to 24 doctors, only one of which was willing to give their name on the record, who said, yes, the company is pressuring us to use more hospice because it makes the money. And she
Wow.
found a case that's horrifying.
Yeah, I looked at that story about a mother and a daughter, Marisol Perez and her mom, Alma Salas. And apparently the doctors were suggesting she go to hospice. They said she's only got a very short time to live. They wanted her to, it sounds like they even wanted to take her off of whatever life support. I think she was on a ventilator. She had a very serious case of COVID, and they wanted to pull the plug on all of the treatment that she was receiving. And the mother, God bless her, persisted. Yes, Dave.
The good news is that a month later, she was discharged and was fine.
Yeah, but that was a result of the mom insisting that she not follow the advice of the physicians. Had it not been for the mom's fortitude, the lady would probably not be here.
Yeah. And where did they get it from? Well, one of the things that came up is that they were using IBM's Watson to figure out, and had a patient who was given a 97% chance of dying. So the doctors were pressured to say, send him to hospice, pull the ventilator, just let him die, 97%. That's pretty definitive. And pulled through. This is the hard questions going for any medical practice. Where do you decide to pull the plug?
Mm-hmm.
And you don't usually have true certainty. 97% is a pretty high number, but it's not 100%.
Mm-hmm.
But the other part of the story is the abuse that happened against the doctor's recommendations and their doctor's advice in Hospital Corporation of America, the largest chain of 45 hospitals or something like that. Not very welcome.
HCI, now, are they under investigation? Is anyone, any official body looking into their behavior, David? Sounds pretty egregious what they're doing.
By and large, nobody looks into ordinary problems.
Mm-hmm.
I'm old enough to have to look at Medicare and Medicaid statistics. And they do a fairly good job in one way. Anybody who goes into rehab, which I did for my falling, or a nursing home, is definitely followed up with a pretty intense questionnaire about what the experience was. And Medicare uses that to come up with ratings and discloses that ratings. That's good. But traditionally, nursing home supervision was god awful. And so were many nursing homes. And every 2 years or so, there's a big study coming out of some place like Harvard showing that the for-profit nursing homes and the for-profit hospitals do not do as well by their patients as the nonprofit ones. Doesn't mean all nonprofit ones are good or all for-profit ones are bad, but it's really tempting when you're dealing with nursing home patients, many of whom are going to die soon, many of whom can't get out of their wheelchairs, many of whom are inarticulate and probably incontinent, to say, why should we give them any care? Why should we take care of them? They're going to die anyway, and save money. And that's always been a problem. 40 years ago, I was dealing with some nursing homes because I was working in medicine at that point, in medical clinic. And it really was like that in
Mm.
many of the facilities being used. Oh, plus they were taking kickbacks from their laboratory
Yeah,
and their
yeah.
doctors, which I,
Dave, it just seems to me, I know this is maybe, more philosophical than practical, but it just seems to me that the profit motive in healthcare is really dysfunctional to a large degree. You would think health and the vitality of a person's body and spirit would be the number one driver, but it seems to me, looking at the industry, the number one driver is money and the profit, and the patient kind of comes second. In my, I don't know what models are in maybe some other nations where maybe they are not profit driven, but I don't, and I don't have statistics to back it up. But my sense is that the profit motive is really not improving healthcare in this country, and if anything, it's working against it. Would you agree with that?
well, I couldn't prove it that it's the profit motive, but we do know that American healthcare, on average, is among the worst.
Mm-hmm.
We may or may not be better than Bulgaria. We are so far behind Germany or France or England or Canada or Taiwan or Korea in life expectancy and infant mortality that it's long been a scandal. All those countries, of course, have universal healthcare systems
Okay.
that aren't perfect. There have been a
Mm-hmm.
lot of problems in British systems, but people do live longer. Babies are less likely to die. There are things profoundly wrong with how we do things in this country. That doesn't mean that you can't get excellent care. I've had some medical problems, and I've been in St. Luke's Hospital and Mount Sinai Hospital and rehab and got an extraordinary care.
Yeah, but
And I'm
Dave, you're
doing
you're
pretty
you're
well.
very well informed, Dave. You're very well educated. You have folks with you like Jenny that I'm sure advocate in a very strong and positive and fierce way. A lot of people don't have that, and
And
if you
why I
do,
keep bringing this to the radio is that you want to have that, you want to get it, you
mm-hmm,
want to get a good doctor and hospital, and more now than ever before, because there's so much new happening in medicine. It's wonderful, but it's not getting to everybody.
yeah. And if you're not, plugged into the latest news, like I know that you look at, you're a professional journalist, so you're looking at this information, you're looking at stuff coming out of the scientific journals. So I mean, you are certainly much more informed than the average U.S. citizen. And then that's one of the reasons why you're so valuable here on this show is that you're bringing that stuff to our audience who might not otherwise know about that. Um, but again, I'm not to be a cynic, but this country is one of the wealthiest ones on the planet, and for us to be so far behind in terms of the healthcare system and the general health of the citizenry, I think it's a crime. I mean,
Move to Canada and you're
what
less
is our
likely
biggest
to live
asset
three or
if it's
4
not
years
the
longer.
people?
I don't have any answers. I'm bringing the facts and when I can,
Hmm.
ways to take advantage of what's out there.
Hmm.
And I'm glad I'm doing it. And hopefully it helps some people.
Yeah,
Why don't you take the next story, Stu? Because you've covered this a number of times. This is about bias and facial recognition
yeah.
and what it can do.
Yeah, and it's kind of a little bit related to healthcare, in that a woman, Portia Woodruff was her name, Detroit mother, 32 years old, was got a knock on the door, and police came in and arrested her for carjacking, based on facial recognition lineup, if you will. Uh, needless to say, she, was not guilty, but she spent 11 hours in the lockup. She was 8 months pregnant, experienced all kind of pain as a result of her pregnancy and being uncomfortable on concrete benches in the police lockup. And she thought she was having a miscarriage. Fortunately, that didn't happen, but she was certainly traumatized, if you will. Went right to the hospital after the 11-hour detainment, and they only let her go because she posted $100,000 personal bond, not because they were found an error in their ways of the facial recognition mistake. No, she posted $100,000 personal bond and was able to get herself out of jail. Went directly to the hospital, and she had to get several IVs and other treatment to kind of bring her back to good health. So, and apparently, this has happened a lot in Detroit, and there've been 6 people. I think this is in Detroit. I'm looking at the story now. 6 people that
Three
have
in
been,
Detroit, three elsewhere.
yeah, 3 Detroit, 3 elsewhere, that have been locked up based on facial recognition. Got it wrong, and guess what? All 6 of the people were black. I guess we should not be surprised at that, but that is the case. There's so much bias built into the facial recognition technology and the algorithms. We've talked about this before, how the error rate is extremely high for black women in particular. In this case, it was a black woman that was misidentified. And to me, it's incredible that police have the power based on this technology just to go knock on somebody's door and take them in. And they took this lady's cell phone. They went through all of her personal records. I mean, what an incredible invasion of privacy. And to me, the facial recognition is not probable cause. I mean, this was a mother. She's a professional woman, and she's an anesthesiologist, and accused her of carjacking. Now, if that were a white woman, Dave, I'm sorry, that would not happen. If this were a white professional woman, and the algorithm and the facial recognition said she did it, they would knock on her door. They would ask her 100 questions, and it probably would leave her alone. It would not happen like that. But you got the bias built into the algorithm, and then you got the further bias built into the police departments, where, of course, the black person is guilty. We're the criminalized race, if you will. So we're the first ones that folks point to as the probable perpetrator of so many crimes. So I mean, it's quite disconcerting, and I don't know that it's going to change anytime soon. You got the various CEOs and technology creators and producers, if you will, code writers and folks that monitor them and direct them, saying, "Oh, we're going to fix this. We're working on correcting it. We're working on making changes." But you have this happening, and this just happened just the other day, and law enforcement has embraced this stuff, and seems to be no pushback in the industry to mitigate that. There's been no pushback. There should be some pushback in law enforcement. I don't know whether that would have to come from Congress. I know there's been a lot of work here in New York State and legislation proposed to monitor and control some of the facial recognition, but it's a national problem. And this poor lady was very traumatized, and fortunately, she did not lose her baby, but she and 3 other folks in Detroit and 3 other folks elsewhere, just because they look like somebody black according to the AI algorithm, arrested and traumatized.
In
So
the second half of the show, I'll bring up some opinions about how accurate AI is
Mm-hmm.
from the people making AI, including the CEO of OpenAI, which makes
Mm-hmm.
ChatGPT. But let me squeeze one other one in before a
Okay.
break. Okay. The article came in a medical journal just within the last week. It's called The Freedom Cure: Structural Intervention as Medicine. It's from two doctors at San Francisco General or University of California at San Francisco. I don't know. Hospital. I'm not quite sure what the name is. Now, how do you cure somebody who had several weeks of low mood, lack of appetite, difficulty concentrating, insomnia, and rumination, and was looking at and doesn't want to harm himself, but often wishes that he were dead? Well, he went to one of these doctors who was a psychiatrist working in the prison and was given a clear diagnosis of acute depression, appropriate. And of course, today, very few psychiatrists can do more than give you a pill. But 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, he saw the same psychiatrist and reported it was all gone. He was much better. It was like he was cured. And that's what the story is: the freedom cure.
Wait, Dave, let me understand. The psychiatrist said when the person got out of jail, he got psychologically healed. Was that the story?
It's even more dramatic than that. He got the word that he was up for reconsideration and might get out of jail.
He got better right then.
3 weeks later, when he saw the doctor again, he was like another person.
Dave, that's a big duh. I mean, of course. I mean, I'm happy that that is being talked about by doctors and by scientists, but from just a layperson's perspective on that, uh, incarceration is such a psychological, I won't even say burden. I mean, come on. I mean, it's like, uh, how can you be psychologically stable and well while you're in a lockup? And how could you not be depressed when you're in jail? Come on. And being given the opportunity to get out, to me that is such a no-brainer that you're going to improve significantly in terms of your mental health when you let folks out. So yeah,
Well,
so
they went and they proved it.
okay.
Now remember that who goes to jail in the United States? Overwhelmingly, the odds are that they are Black or Latino
Yeah,
and poor.
yeah.
It was really dramatic as we looked at who went to jail for narcotics. 9 out of 10 were not Caucasian, were not white.
Mm-hmm.
But we both went to a fancy college. And I will tell you that it definitely confirmed what all the studies have been saying. Whites are at least as likely to do drugs, possibly more so because drugs are expensive.
Yeah,
And we
yeah.
really saw a lot of that in the fancy college we went to.
Okay, Dave, we got to take a break, Dave. We're well into the show here. We got a lot more to talk about. I want to talk a little bit more about AI's racialism as it affects history and culture. And we got a story about the Chinese looking to control the amount of time that kids spend online on their phones. It's a fascinating piece that I think maybe we can learn from, as well as talk about the latest competition to Twitter, which is the Microsoft Meta's new offering called Threads. But we'll talk about that when we come back. It's Community and Technology on WHCR 90.3 FM. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after a brief musical break.
All right, let's invite on for a quick spot in Reggae Sunsplash before we go and splash it down on the beach today. Let's hear it for Eka Mouse.
Me come out, so I don't really dress stylish, but you know what I mean? Some army style. He come out, don't DJ, you know. He come out, sing. Yeah, I sing. This when someone a sing, them say la la, wah wah, yeah, yeah. He come on and say that. Just bang bang, biddy bang, gang, 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 gang. Yeah. See that one I know, that one I call down the getaway I growing. I want tune me I do, you know, Kawa. I know people want to know he come out, you know, see it. Bang 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 decken, bang doddy men, bang don den, ben a McCoy, then bang bang biddy men, den, ben a men, den, ben a McCoy, ben a mini men, ben a mini men, ben a men. Hey, down in the ghetto is where I grow. Pain and tribulation, all I know. Mommy and daddy, all that we I live for. One make we a feel suffer so. Hey, storm me come and a blow down me door. Rain a pour through me one window. Shoes tear up, me do the show. Me no know, me no know, me no know. Me no know, I know me no know, I know me no know. Me no know, me no know. I know me no know, I know me no know. Hey, fi me mama tell me don't rob no store. Else police beat you, make you back sore. She tell her daughter don't turn her whore. Just take that stuff for reason so. Hey, 5 on the bed, 4 on the floor. When me I go do me no no oh oh oh. Mama does a ball, Papa does a ball. The greatest crime is to be poor. Hey, say hey, me no know. But I know me no know, I know me no know. Ding ding, I know me no know. I know why me no know. Ding ding ding, and I go going. Lang ding ding ding. Dub it. Different lyrics. Bing ding 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 ding. Me mama, that means my mother. Hey, sometime I man singing a patois. Hey, hear it as foreigners. Hey, let me teach you some patois. Hey, some Jamaica patois. Hey, when I say me mama, it means my mother. When I say my papa, it means my father. Hey, she grow me without a papa. Hey, Jano O, police kill my brother. Him named Bobby Bower. He used to live at Olaba. Hey, Jano O, him a charge him murder. Don't shoot, don't him struck down. Benamen den. Gainy, gonna go going. And the other side, yeah. Me live in a area. Hey, Jano O, and no residential. I pay old cat park, some mark removal. Hey, some of them mark for hire. Here comes a con man in a continental. Him brainwash every youth, them gone in a rental. Some lick and turn over, some in a hospital. Me you say them just kill another general. Hey, who kill? Liquor and the O. I know me no know. Hey, who kill? General on the O. And I know me no know. Dub it. Ging, a midi, ging, a mokoi. Bend, dub it, star. Early one morning, assassinator. One morning, news flash wake me out and me sleep. 3 man and a woman, and so a picnic. Jah know say them lay down, they in the streets. And now me no see it. Hey, me no see it. Hey, me this and only ask who do it. How do it and who do it. Some say them not know. Some say me be so old. When did the men go on? Bend, then, Monday. When they palm out the bed, now so going. Bend the men go going. When they palm it, I'm going. Balalan. Bing, dun, then a mini, bin. Baby go on. All over the world. Good night. Me say that only for assassinator, kill man, woman and picnic. Say them a traitor. Hey, some of them a fi run left the area, run left them furniture, run left them furniture. But me and me brethren, I in a one theater. Hey, but I come back the cool later. When the area cooler, but I men dance, ging, 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 out the men.
Let's hear for Ika Mouse.
Okay, we're back. We need technology with Dave Burstein and Stu Reid. Before the break, we were talking a little bit about facial recognition and the racist assumptions that are built into so many of the algorithms, resulting in folks getting arrested, falsely arrested. I wanted to talk a little bit about another story that I saw that shows AI bias with artists, Black artists. In particular, one artist, Stephanie Dinkins, a Brooklyn young lady, she had been a recipient of a $100,000 Guggenheim Museum award. So she's not just any old body, but anyway, she has been working for 7 years with AI to realistically depict Black women. And what she says is, and I'm quoting here from her directly, whether she uses the term African American woman or Black woman, machine distortions that mangle facial features and hair textures occur at high rates. According to her, the biases are embedded deep in these systems, so it seems to become ingrained and automatic. The AI technology seem to ignore or distort artists' text prompts, affecting how Black people are depicted in images, and in others, they seem to censor or stereotype Black history and culture. Just wanted to mention one other artist, Dave, a Senegalese artist, Linda Dalnia Rabitz. She says Black people are accustomed to being unseen. We know that. And then when we are seen, we are accustomed to being misrepresented. We know that too. This artist, Ms. Rebitz, put in an algorithm into AI, asking them to show what her coastal capital city of Senegal looked like. And she said the algorithm came back with the worst stereotype generated images of desert and deserted landscape. Nothing like what the Senegal looks like, Dakar in particular, the capital of Senegal. And, quoting her, the algorithm skews toward a cultural image of Africa that the West has created. It defaults to the worst stereotypes that already exist on the internet. So, going back to the Tarzan movies, Dave, when we were kids, this stuff is baked into AI. One more data point. Bloomberg analyzed more than 5,000 images recently generated by Stability AI and found that the program amplifies stereotypes about race and gender, typically depicting people with lighter skin tones as holding higher paid jobs, while suspects with darker tones were labeled, quote, dishwashers and housekeepers. I mean, this is astounding that in 2023, technology being as sophisticated as we think it is, that these stereotypes that go back 100 years are persisting and still baked into this so-called new order. It's amazing. I mean, I won't say I'm surprised, Dave, but I'm certainly disheartened that to be supposedly intelligent, artificial intelligence, and there's so much racism still there.
And of course, one of the key reasons that racism is still there is that artificial intelligence isn't really intelligence. It's
right.
just looking at a whole lot of data that's out there and looking for patterns. That's actually how most of this stuff works. And if you scan everything on the web to put into your big model, which is part of the kind of thing they do, if there's a lot of racism on the web, and there is, it shows up. Everybody in the field knows this quite well, and many of them have been working against it in a lot of different ways. But let me give you a warning. The most popular one, the one that's driving everybody to think that artificial intelligence is changing everything, was ChatGPT, and Dolly, the other one that makes the pictures. ChatGPT can do a remarkable job finding information, writing term papers, passing medical board and law board exams, doing people in a lot of things like that, reading mammograms better than the radiologists that are compared against. So they're really exciting. The head of that company is named Sam Altman. And Sam recently said, there's nobody who is less likely to believe something said by AI than I am. And that's, of course, because he knows how many mistakes there are.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of the reality. One of the things that's been coming across is lately several significant people, university professor types, are saying that the mistakes are not just, it's not a good system, but are inherent in the way things are done. And they're going to be happening unless we come up with totally different systems. Not clear whether that's how it's going to work out, but you have to know when you're working with AI is that it will hallucinate, it will have biases reflecting the biases of the data that goes into it. Garbage in gives you garbage out. And that it's not really being checked as much as it should be. Because everybody is desperate to get to market, because there are literally thousands of companies, including the biggest ones, spending hundreds of billions of dollars to create AI products because they think there's so much potential there. And you don't want to be second in that world. Tim
Yeah,
Cook,
the number of the dollar amount that's being invested in these companies is I don't have the number in front of me, Dale. I was looking for it. I thought I had it, but it's many billions of dollars. And I think we talked last week on the show about how so many of the tech companies that just 6-9 months ago were languishing on the stock market, losing value, are now through the roof. Primarily, I would say solely because of the hopes of AI and the revenue and the profits that it's going to generate. So, as you say, folks are racing at light speed to become leaders in that space, and the cautionary things that people like Sam Altman are throwing out there, one of the creators and CEOs of one of the biggest companies. The caution is in my mind is a little hypocritical, because they're not slowing down their spending, they're not slowing down the activity. I know that we've talked about there was a petition signed by a lot of these heavyweight CEOs and AI company executives not too long ago that suggested that there be a pause in AI development, but I don't think that's happened. People are talking about, oh, it doesn't work that well. It's got a lot of errors. The Sam Altman guy is saying, I'm the first one to not believe it, but I mean, business as usual. I mean, it's going at light speed. All systems go. So I don't see any mitigation. I don't see any self-correction, Dave. I'm hoping, but
they're working very hard on correcting them.
you think so?
Yeah. Somebody like OpenAI, Sam Altman's company, ChatGPT, is spending hundreds of billions trying to solving his problems. But that's not enough, because some of these are hard problems. Everything in AI right now is a hard problem. It's not understood well enough to give reliable results. Gives you useful results, right? DeepMind's protein diagrams, three-dimensional models of proteins, is transforming a whole lot of drug discovery in medicine. It's good stuff, but it's still got problems, and everybody in the field knows this and talks about it and tries to work on it, but they're under enormous pressure to ship, to get things developed. OpenAI, ChatGPT, Dolly changed the way everybody thought. They came out in last November, this February, and suddenly showed what was possible. It had problems, but it did remarkable things. As I say, it can pass the bar association and score, oh, well, it was only about the 93rd percentile in the graduate record exam. So maybe I could beat it. But they had to get it out. Google actually was ahead of them, but Google held back, saying it's not ready for prime time and we're going to test it more before we ship it.
Mm-hmm.
And Google's been clobbered ever since. To put a number on how extreme the incentives are, Amazon had earnings came out last Thursday or Friday. They had a good quarter, partly because all these AI things are renting time and space on the Amazon cloud. Stock went up $80 billion in one day.
80 billion, Dave, in one day?
In one day.
Wow. That's crazy.
Now, a bad quarter come from somebody who's actually doing lots of stuff with AI, but hasn't been making a lot of publicity about it. In fact, Tim Cook of Apple recently said, we don't want to brag about it, but we're putting it in every product we have.
You're talking about Apple now.
Apple had a bad quarter because people weren't buying expensive iPhones.
Yeah, what's bad in the Apple lexicon, Dave?
Well, bad in Apple lexicon is that the stock value went to a little under $3 trillion and it fell $125 billion that day. No, the iPhone sales were literally down slightly, a couple of percentage points, because the phones are working really well and people aren't upgrading them so fast, and people have a lot of financial problems that hold them back from buying iPhones.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, Apple made, I don't know, $10 billion last quarter, some number like that, maybe even bigger than that. But it wasn't quite enough. And the stock went down in one day, 125 billion. The same day, Amazon went up 80 billion.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the kinds of stakes that make people do things that they know they shouldn't be doing, like release products that aren't really ready.
Well, before we close out, David, we're almost out of time. I just wanted to mention, many of our listeners and viewers may have heard about it, but early last month, early July, Meta, parent company of Facebook and Instagram, released a Twitter competitor called Threads. And it got 70 million downloads almost immediately. And of course, it got adopted so quickly, in large part because its parent company, Facebook, Meta, has something like 2 billion users. So they got a big audience to put it in front of. So that had a lot to do with its adoption, but I think it's still got a ways to go. Yeah. What do you think?
As the movie said, you can't make a billion friends without making a few enemies.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the movie about Facebook. And there's a whole lot of reasons people don't like Facebook, just as they don't like Twitter, including almost everybody in Europe and India's governments, which hates the fact that all the money is going to California and Oregon, to Facebook and Google and Apple and Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
And they are very unhappy.
Yeah. I just wanted to quote, there's a Harvard professor, Dave, Shoshana Zuboff, who made a statement that I think just capsulized just what you're talking about in such a way. And she said, talking about the tiny number of gargantuan companies that are ever more have control over our attention. And that's a really important way, in my mind, to look at it. They have control over our attention. And what she said is they have institutionalized a new form of profound inequality in who controls information. Threads is simply another property in a global surveillance empire. I thought that was a really great encapsulation of so much that's going on.
And next week we'll be back. Hopefully we'll still have a whole lot of positive stories.
Yeah.
A lot of negative ones that are getting out there too.
Like to bring some good news where we can, for sure. Okay. Thanks. This has been Community and Technology with Dave Burstein and Stu Reid on WHCR 90.3 FM every Wednesday, 5 p.m. Please check us out. Just might learn something. See you next week.